Italy in the 1920s. What a fascinating time in history. The country was recovering from the devastation of World War I, trying to rebuild while facing serious financial challenges. The economy was in rough shape, burdened by huge war debts and inflation. But surprisingly, the 1920s weren't all doom and gloom for Italy. Slowly but surely, there were some signs of improvement, though the situation was definitely a mixed bag. Agriculture was still the backbone of Italy's economy, especially in the south. The north, however, was more industrialized, with bustling factories producing textiles, steel, and machinery. But there was a major divide between the two regions. The north had some growing wealth and industrial power, while the south remained stuck in poverty, stuck in farming. It wasn't pretty. Exports were key for Italy. You could find Italian silk, wine, and olive oil being sent to markets around the world. On the flip side, they had to import raw materials like coal and iron to fuel their industries. Mussolini, ever the nationalist, wanted to change this. His solution? Push for self-sufficiency. His battle for grain, yep, it's a real thing, aimed to boost domestic production of wheat and reduce Italy's dependence on foreign imports. Now, let's talk about technology. Italy wasn't exactly leading the charge in industrial advancements like some of its European neighbors, but there was progress. They focused heavily on infrastructure, improving the railway system and modernizing ports, making trade smoother and faster. The car industry was booming, and Fiat was a star player in this. Then there was aviation. Italy wasn't exactly the birthplace of modern flight, but by the late 1920s, they were certainly making their mark in the skies. Still, they were way behind other powers in terms of industrialization, relying heavily on foreign expertise to keep up. But here's where things get really interesting: politics. The 1920s saw Italy undergo a dramatic political shift, thanks to Mussolini. He wasn't always the dictator we know today, but by 1922, after the infamous March on Rome, Mussolini became prime minister, and once he had that power, he wasn't giving it up. Italy quickly became a one-party state as Mussolini dismantled democracy, silenced the press, and crushed any political opposition. Fascism was on the rise, and Mussolini pushed aggressive nationalism and military expansion. Italy's dream to recreate a new Roman Empire, and they weren't shy about it. When it came to the military, the 1920s was a rebuilding phase. World War I had exposed major weaknesses in Italy's military capabilities, so Mussolini made it a priority to modernize. The army started focusing on mechanization, incorporating tanks, aircraft, and stronger naval forces. There was also a growing ambition to expand Italy's influence overseas, particularly in Africa. With the idea of creating an Italian empire, this would set the stage for the brutal invasion of Ethiopia a decade later. Socially, Italy was undergoing a huge shift as well. Fascism wasn't just about politics. It was about reshaping society itself. Mussolini wanted to control everything: labor, production, even personal lives. The government pushed for traditional family values, with women being encouraged to stay home, focus on motherhood, and avoid any involvement in the workforce. But of course, not everyone was on board with this new vision. There were still pockets of resistance, especially in the south, where poverty and discontent were rampant. Italy was a nation divided, with the north becoming more industrialized and urbanized, while the south remained stuck in the past. Now, let's talk about life under Mussolini. Healthcare and welfare in Italy during the 1920s were, well, not great. The country's infrastructure was underdeveloped, especially in rural areas. However, Mussolini did introduce some reforms, like combating malaria in the south, which was a huge problem. Still, living conditions were rough, particularly in the south where poverty, disease, and illiteracy were widespread. In the industrialized north, things were slightly better, but workers still faced miserable working conditions and low wages. Ethnically, Italy was a pretty homogeneous society, but it wasn't without its regional diversity. Northern Italy was more European in its influence, while the south, particularly places like Sicily, was more isolated and traditional. There weren't many immigrants to Italy during this time, but Mussolini did start to push for Italian colonization, particularly in Libya. The fascist regime wanted to settle Italians in its African colonies, helping expand their empire. Now, we can't talk about the 1920s in Italy without talking about the people who made it all happen. Benito Mussolini, obviously, was the big figure. His grip on power shaped every aspect of Italian life. But he didn't do it alone. Key figures like his son-in-law Galeazzo Ciano, who was Italy's foreign minister, and Italo Balbo, a prominent military leader, played crucial roles in enforcing Mussolini's vision. Culturally, figures like Gabriele D'Annunzio, a poet and novelist, helped shape the fascist narrative, glorifying Italy's imperial past and feeding into Mussolini's nationalistic rhetoric. In terms of governance, Mussolini's fascist regime made the country a dictatorship. He ruled with an iron fist, silencing opposition, suppressing dissent, and building a corporatist economy. Mussolini's focus shifted from stabilizing Italy to aggressively expanding Italy's empire. He invested heavily in military buildup and the idea of an Italian empire stretching into Africa. Speaking of opposition, crime and underground movements didn't have much room to thrive under Mussolini. The fascists kept a tight grip on the country. Their secret police, the OVRA, were always on the lookout for any signs of rebellion. But even with all the repression, crime didn't disappear entirely. The mafia in the south still had a strong hold, operating in places like Sicily and Naples, where the government's reach was limited. Mussolini's regime primarily focused on crushing left-wing groups, including socialists and communists, forcing many into exile or imprisoning them. In the arts and culture, the 1920s were a time of propaganda and national pride. Mussolini knew the power of media, so he used art, literature, and film to push his ideals of strength and unity. Futurism, a movement that had been around before Mussolini, was co-opted to glorify Italy's industrial progress and military might. Cinema flourished too, with directors like Roberto Rossellini making waves. But Mussolini didn't just want to celebrate the present, he wanted to revive the glory of ancient Rome, linking the fascist regime to Italy's imperial past. Religion was also a major part of Italian life. The majority of Italians were Catholic, and Mussolini knew he couldn't ignore the church. In 1929, he signed the Lateran Treaty with the Vatican, recognizing Catholicism as the state religion. But while he made peace with the church, Mussolini still sought to limit its political power, using it when convenient for his agenda. And of course, no discussion of Italy would be complete without mentioning the folklore, legends, and myths that were still alive and well in the 1920s. Italy's rich cultural history was full of stories about ancient gods, Roman heroes, and mythological figures. But Mussolini's regime sought to use these stories to forge a new Italian identity, one tied to the glory of ancient Rome. The past wasn't just something to admire, it was something to build on. Finally, let's touch on some of the key events of the 1920s. Mussolini's rise to power in 1922, the signing of the Lateran Treaty in 1929, and the growing militarization all set the stage for Italy's involvement in wars and expansionist ambitions in the following decades. The 1920s were a time of tension, not just within Italy, but across Europe as Mussolini's fascist regime started making waves. So, what's the takeaway here? Italy in the 1920s was a country at a crossroads, facing economic challenges, political upheaval, and a cultural shift that would echo throughout the 20th century. It was a decade that laid the foundation for Mussolini's reign, which would lead Italy down a dark path toward war and dictatorship. It's a complex, fascinating period in history, and the ripples of that time still shape Italy's identity today. Thanks for tuning in to The World as We Know It, and joining me in another chapter of world history. As always, there are more detailed notes in the description, and we welcome any requests or recommendations in the comments section. If you found this video helpful, entertaining, or educational, please consider liking this video and subscribing to support our channel. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next video.